every moment of your life, your mind is active thinking, processing, imagining, judging, and reacting. What many people fail to realize is that the thoughts we entertain most often don't just pass through unnoticed. They begin to form the lens through which we experience life itself. In other words, your most dominant thoughts, the ones that occupy your mind consistently, are actively shaping your reality. Not metaphorically, literally. When you wake up in the morning and the first thing you feel is anxiety about the day ahead, and you allow that thought to linger, to grow, to multiply, your brain begins to filter the world through that anxious state. You notice more things to worry about. Small challenges feel like big threats. People's neutral expressions suddenly seem judgmental. That's not coincidence. That's confirmation bias, your brain seeking evidence to support what it already believes. And where did that belief come from? From thought. Thoughts repeated over and over again become beliefs. Beliefs become habits. Habits become your identity, and identity, that governs everything: how you speak, how you act, what you think you're capable of, what you think you deserve. If your dominant thought is, "I'm not good enough," then guess what? Even if the world hands you an opportunity on a silver platter, you won't take it. You'll sabotage it. You'll shrink back. Not because the opportunity wasn't real, but because your dominant thought wouldn't let you see it as real. It wouldn't let you believe you were worthy of it. Think about that. How many people live entire lives based not on their actual potential, but on the limits of their own thoughts? The brain is designed to adapt. It doesn't know the difference between what's real and what's vividly imagined. That's why athletes visualize success before a race. That's why some of the most successful people in the world talk about mindset more than strategy. They've learned something powerful. The consistent focus of your thoughts trains your brain to expect certain outcomes, and your behavior follows that expectation. Imagine two people walking into the same room. One has been feeding thoughts of failure, rejection, and doubt. The other has been cultivating thoughts of confidence, gratitude, and possibility. The room is the same. The people in it are the same. But each individual will experience that room in radically different ways. One sees obstacles, the other sees openings. One hesitates, the other acts. That's not magic. That's mindset in motion. And it all starts with what you think about the most. The problem is, most people don't realize how often they let their minds drift into negativity. They assume thoughts just happen, that they're passengers in the process. But the truth is, your thoughts can be directed. You can train your mind the way you train a muscle. You just have to become aware of the patterns. Start noticing what thoughts come up when you're tired, when you're challenged, when someone questions you. Are they thoughts that build you up or break you down? Are you looping stories of why it won't work, or stories of how you're going to make it happen? And understand this: thoughts are not isolated. They have a ripple effect. The dominant thought that you're not smart enough doesn't just stay in your head. It leaks into your posture, into the tone of your voice, into the decisions you avoid, into the relationships you sabotage because deep down you think you're not worth the effort. All of that traces back to a thought. One thought repeated often enough that it became your internal reality and eventually your external one too. Now imagine replacing that thought. Imagine repeating a new story, that you're capable, resourceful, and growing every single day. Not once, not twice, but 1,000 times, through the doubt, through the failures, through the noise. What do you think begins to change? Not just how you feel, but how you show up. The energy you bring to a room, the effort you give, the opportunities you recognize, the chances you take. Because when your dominant thought is rooted in possibility, your entire system orients itself toward progress. And life responds accordingly. You may think it's a small shift, changing a thought, but that small shift is the foundation of transformation. Your entire future hinges on the story you tell yourself, the thought that plays the loudest in your mind. Because in the end, you don't get what you want. You don't even get what you work for. You get what you expect. An expectation is just another word for your most dominant thought. Human behavior, habits, and beliefs aren't shaped by one-time events or isolated thoughts. They're sculpted by what we hear, say, and think again and again. The mind is an incredible learning machine, but like any machine, it responds to frequency. It learns what you teach it over time, not once, not twice, but through persistent, focused repetition. That's how everything you believe about yourself, your life, and your place in the world was formed, through what was repeated until it became truth in your eyes. Think about how children learn. They don't absorb a language by hearing a word once. They hear it repeatedly in conversation, in songs, in stories. Over time, their brains begin to associate meaning with those sounds. Repetition wires the brain that never changes. The adult brain may be more complex, but the mechanism remains the same. What's repeated is reinforced. Your thoughts work the same way. If you constantly tell yourself you're not enough, even in subtle ways, your brain doesn't question it. It simply takes the repetition as a signal of importance. The more you repeat a thought, the more weight it carries. The more it shapes your emotional responses, your identity, and ultimately, your actions. That's why people who continually dwell on negative thoughts often find themselves stuck in loops, emotionally, professionally, and even physically, not because of what's actually happening to them, but because of the programming they've unknowingly repeated into their subconscious. Repetition is how beliefs are born, and once a belief is rooted deeply enough, it no longer feels like a thought. It feels like a fact. A person who constantly thinks I'm terrible at relationships doesn't need someone to prove them wrong. They've repeated that message internally so many times that now, their brain filters everything through that narrative. Every failed date becomes evidence. Every emotional reaction from a partner becomes confirmation. And over time, the original thought becomes invisible, buried underneath years of reinforced patterns. But here's the thing, repetition isn't just what creates negative outcomes. It also builds power. This is why affirmations work when they're used properly, not just said out loud occasionally, but internalized, embodied, and repeated until the brain starts to accept them as normal. When you consistently feed your mind images and thoughts of what you want to become, the brain begins to adapt, not in a vague, mystical sense, but in measurable neurological terms. Neural pathways are literally strengthened by what you think and visualize often. This is why elite performers in sports, business, and the arts use mental rehearsal. They aren't just imagining success for the sake of daydreaming. They're training their minds through repetition. They're priming their brains to feel confident under pressure, to execute with clarity, and to move with purpose. The repetition of those thoughts builds mental resilience. It builds focus. It creates an internal script that guides them through the most chaotic moments. And the truth is, you're already doing this every day. Whether you realize it or not, you're rehearsing thoughts in your mind constantly. You're playing mental loops from the past, future worries, internal criticisms, or hopeful dreams. The problem is, most people leave that process on autopilot. They let negative thoughts repeat without challenge, while allowing positive ones to fade after a single moment of inspiration. The mind doesn't prioritize what's true, it prioritizes what's repeated. So if you feed itself doubt every day, it will begin to defend that doubt like it's part of your identity. That's why it's not enough to think a powerful thought once and expect change. You have to drive it in. You have to make it louder than the old voice that's been looping for years. And you do that through repetition. Not forced, fake enthusiasm, but intentional practice. You repeat thoughts of strength, of clarity, of commitment, not to trick your mind, but to rewire it. There's a reason habits are hard to break. They're a result of repetition, but that's also why new habits can be formed. Not just habits of action, but habits of thought. If you start your day every morning with the same thought, one that empowers you, anchors you, or refocuses you over time, that thought becomes your default. The brain learns that this is where we begin. This is how we orient. And from there, your emotional state shifts. Your perception of the day shifts, your response to stress shifts. Every thought is a seed, but repetition is the water. You don't need to drown your mind, you just need to feed it consistently. Over time, the roots take hold. The old weeds lose their strength, and what grows in their place is not random. It's whatever you've repeated the most. The most dangerous thoughts are not the loudest ones. They're the quiet ones that play every day in the background. And the most powerful thoughts don't need to be extreme. They just need to be consistent. That's how you turn new thinking into new wiring. That's how you turn intention into identity. The mind listens, it follows. But only if you give it something strong enough and repeat it long enough to override what's already there. Life doesn't unfold in straight lines. It comes with storms, detours, breakthroughs, breakdowns, and surprises that no one can predict. Some people are handed setbacks they didn't deserve. Others are born into conditions that seem to set them far behind from the start. But if you pay close attention and really study the lives of people who rise above their circumstances, you'll notice a powerful truth. It isn't their situation that defines them. It's how they think within that situation. The game changer isn't the environment, it's the mindset. Two people can grow up in the same house, with the same financial challenges, the same family dynamics, the same neighborhood. One stays stuck in the cycle, blaming the past, waiting for a break. The other decides to break the pattern, to take control, to rewrite the story. What's the difference? It's not luck. It's not intelligence. It's mindset. One person believes they are shaped by the world around them. The other believes they can shape the world through what they do, how they grow, and what they choose to believe about themselves. Circumstances can be harsh, even brutal. No one is denying that. But they are never the final word. What matters more than the event is the meaning you assign to it. Your mindset determines what you do with pain, with failure, with rejection. Will you turn it into fuel, or will you let it define your limits? Will you use it as proof that you're done, or as the very reason you have to rise? You've seen people who seem to thrive no matter what life throws at them. They lose a job and somehow build a better one. They get knocked down and stand back up with more fire than before. That's not because life is easier for them. It's because they've trained their minds to respond rather than react. They've built an inner world stronger than the outer chaos. Their mindset isn't based on what's happening. It's based on what they choose to believe is possible despite what's happening. Mindset is the filter through which every experience is interpreted. If your mindset is that you're a victim of your environment, then every hardship becomes another piece of evidence. Every challenge feels personal. Every failure feels permanent. But if your mindset is that you are a creator, that you are still in charge of your response, your growth, your focus, then everything, even the setbacks, becomes raw material for your next evolution. There's a difference between facts and interpretation. The fact might be that you lost money, got fired, or were betrayed. But what happens next is not determined by that fact. It's determined by the story you tell yourself about it. And that story is dictated by your mindset. One person sees a failure and says, "This proves I'm not good enough." Another sees the same failure and says, "This was a painful lesson, but I know what not to do next time." Same circumstance, entirely different direction in life. That's why success in any area doesn't start with resources. It starts with perspective. how you see yourself, how you view the struggle, how you define possibility. There are people with less talent, fewer connections, and worse conditions who still rise because they've refused to let their environment limit their internal power. They've built a mindset that doesn't flinch when things get hard. A mindset that adapts, that learns, that keeps showing up long after most people quit. And here's the paradox: when your mindset shifts, your circumstances often follow, not instantly, not magically, but consistently, because the moment you start acting, thinking, and responding from a different mental framework, your habits change, your energy changes, the way people perceive you changes, and little by little, your outer world begins to align with the new internal world you've built. This is why two people can go through the same storm and come out with completely different outcomes. One is wrecked, the other is refined, one is bitter, the other is wiser, sharper, more resilient. The storm didn't make that difference. The mindset did. It's not about denying reality. It's about deciding what you're going to do with it. Because every person gets dealt a different hand in life, but mindset determines how you play the cards you've got. Even when it feels like everything around you is out of control, your mindset remains the one thing you can influence directly. It's the foundation for every decision, every risk, every boundary you set or break. It decides whether you shrink or rise, whether you settle or stretch, whether you wait for permission or start building from where you are. Your mindset isn't a soft skill, it's the engine. It's what keeps you going when the plan falls apart, when people doubt you, when the results don't show up right away. There's no situation so hopeless that the right mindset can't begin to shift it. And there's no amount of external success that can protect you from the consequences of a broken one. That's the power you carry, not in controlling what happens to you, but in mastering the one thing that will always determine what happens next. Every single thought you think, every belief you reinforce, and every story you repeat to yourself is a seed. You may not notice it in the moment because thoughts often seem small, harmless, fleeting, but that's where most people underestimate their power. Thoughts are not passive. They're active forces that, over time, shape everything: your self-image, your behavior, your habits, and ultimately your destiny. Like seeds planted in soil, they don't show immediate results, but they begin growing the moment you give them attention. The question is not whether you're planting seeds, it's what kind of seeds you're planting. Most people are unaware that their thoughts are creating a future. They assume their inner world is just a reaction to their external world, but it's the opposite. The thoughts you choose to entertain are setting into motion a chain reaction of feelings, actions, and outcomes. Think about worry. One anxious thought leads to more. Suddenly your body tenses, your decisions shrink, your vision narrows. It started with a single mental seed. What if this goes wrong? Left unchallenged, it takes root, spreads, and produces the fruit of fear, hesitation, and regret. The mind is fertile ground. It will grow whatever you plant in it with enough repetition and emotion. If you constantly think in terms of lack, I'll never have enough, I don't deserve more, it's always harder for me, then those thoughts begin to grow roots. They affect your energy, you stop noticing opportunities, you stop trying, you stop believing. And slowly, without realizing it, your life becomes a reflection of the weeds you've allowed to grow unchecked. But the opposite is also true. When you start planting seeds of strength, belief, discipline, and possibility, the shift might feel small at first, almost unnoticeable. But those seeds, repeated and nurtured, grow stronger over time. They start influencing how you speak to yourself in the mirror, how you handle failure, how you show up in difficult conversations, and most importantly, how you see your own potential. You're not waiting for external evidence to believe in yourself. You've already planted the belief, and now the evidence starts to follow. You don't have to be in the perfect situation to start planting better seeds. You can be in pain and still choose to plant a thought of resilience. You can be broke and still plant a seed of abundance. You can feel stuck and still plant a seed of movement. The external world does not need to change for you to begin shifting your internal narrative, but you have to become intentional about what you're planting. Because whether you're aware of it or not, the planting is already happening. Every complaint is a seed. Every excuse is a seed. Every I can't, every this always happens to me, every I'll never be enough, they're all seeds. Spoken or unspoken, they carry weight. They carry direction, and when planted over time, they become the framework for your actions. The way you carry yourself, the standards you accept, the goals you abandon, all of it starts with what's growing in the soil of your mind. But just like a real garden, your mind requires weeding. You have to examine your thinking and be honest about what's taking root. Some of those thoughts didn't even start with you. They were passed down, absorbed, picked up from people who never believed in themselves, and you unknowingly accepted them as truth. That's why awareness is everything. You can't change a thought you've accepted as normal. You have to recognize the seed for what it is, not fact, but a choice. A decision you're making daily. There is power in knowing that nothing is fixed. A seed does not become a tree overnight, which means your current situation, your current mindset, your current self. It's all in progress. It's all in motion. And if you don't like what's growing in your life right now, you don't have to attack the fruit. You don't even have to fix the entire field. You simply need to go to the root and plant something new. It won't feel natural at first. Positive, empowering thoughts often feel uncomfortable when you've been living under the weight of doubt. But discomfort is not a sign that the seed is wrong. It's a sign that you're breaking through hardened ground. The more you repeat it, the more you nurture it with action, with focus, with consistency, the stronger it grows. And over time, it becomes part of your default thinking. You stop having to force belief because it's already there. You've cultivated it. Every day is a planting season. Every conversation, every internal dialogue, every reaction to a challenge is a chance to sow something better. You don't have to get it perfect. You just have to stay conscious, stay committed, stay awake to what's growing in the background of your life. Because thoughts don't ask permission. They grow based on attention and whatever you focus on, fear or faith, scarcity or strength, you feed. The key is not to wait for a moment of inspiration or a breakthrough to begin. The process starts in the small, unnoticed moments, the morning routines, the thoughts you entertain while driving, the mental patterns you fall into when no one is around. Those are the moments that matter most. That's where your future is being built. Not by force, but by frequency. Not by what you want once, but by what you repeat over and over until it becomes who you are. Change doesn't begin with action. It doesn't start when you buy a new planner, download another productivity app, or write out your goals for the 10th time. Real transformation, the kind that reshapes your thinking, your behavior, and ultimately your life, begins with a single moment of awareness. Awareness is the spark that lights the fire. Without it, everything else is just motion without meaning. You can't shift what you don't see. You can't fix a pattern you're unaware of. You can't upgrade your life if you're still blind to the programming that's running the show in the background. Awareness is the starting line, the place where all lasting growth takes root. It's what happens when you stop living on autopilot long enough to actually hear the thoughts you've been rehearsing every day. It's when you realize the way you speak to yourself matters. It's when you catch yourself thinking, I'm not good enough. And instead of accepting it, you question it. Where did that thought come from? Is it even true? Do I want to keep carrying that? That moment of noticing is more powerful than hours of effort made unconsciously. Most people never pause long enough to become truly aware of what's guiding their behavior. They're reacting instead of responding. They're moving fast but without direction. They're stuck in patterns that were inherited, absorbed, or developed under pressure. And those patterns silently dictate what they believe they're capable of. Awareness interrupts the cycle. It's the voice that says, wait, why am I doing this? Why am I thinking this way? Is this really how I want to live? You can't change what you haven't named. The first breakthrough is internal. It's not about changing the world around you. It's about waking up to the world inside you. Becoming aware means tuning in instead of checking out. It means observing without immediately reacting. And most importantly, it means telling yourself the truth, not the comfortable version, not the version that keeps you safe, but the honest, unfiltered reality of where your thoughts, habits, and emotions have been leading you. That kind of truth can be uncomfortable. It requires humility. It's easier to blame your circumstances, your past, or other people than to take ownership of your own internal dialogue. But awareness doesn't judge, it reveals. It gives you the data. It shows you the patterns, and once you see the pattern, you gain the power to disrupt it. The most important step in transformation is recognizing what's really going on underneath the surface. The fears you hide, the stories you replay, the expectations you carry that were never really yours. Once you become aware of your inner world, everything shifts. You start noticing your triggers. You hear the voice of self, doubt, and instead of letting it drive the car, you start asking why it's there. You recognize when you're falling into old behaviors and catch yourself before they spiral. That level of awareness gives you leverage, the ability to respond instead of react, to pause instead of panic, to choose instead of repeat. Awareness also breaks the illusion that you're stuck. It shows you that your limitations are not fixed. They're patterns, and patterns, by their nature, can be changed, but only when you stop numbing out and start paying attention. Noticing how you speak to yourself when you fail. Noticing what you believe about success, love, money, time. Noticing where you shrink and where you avoid. That observation creates space, and in that space, new choices can be made. There's a massive difference between someone who is self-aware and someone who isn't. Two people can go through the same challenge. One spirals into self-pity and blame because they've never questioned their automatic thoughts. The other stops, breathes, and sees what's really happening inside. The fear, the expectation, the old story being triggered. That moment of awareness doesn't fix everything instantly, but it puts the power back in their hands. Awareness isn't just about spotting what's wrong. It's also about recognizing what's right. When you become more conscious, you start to see the thoughts that give you energy, the habits that make you stronger, the moments when you were proud of how you showed up. You learn to amplify what works, not just fight what doesn't. That's part of transformation too, not just cleaning out the weeds, but noticing and nurturing the good things already growing. You can't expect to change a lifetime of mental conditioning in a week, but the moment you become aware of it, you're no longer its prisoner. You're the observer, and once you're the observer, you can become the editor. You can challenge the narrative. You can reframe the meaning. You can decide which thoughts to keep and which ones to let go. And that decision, repeated with clarity and commitment, becomes the foundation of your transformation. Awareness is not a one-time breakthrough. It's a daily discipline. It's asking the deeper question in ordinary moments. It's refusing to live numbly. It's choosing presence over distraction. It's realizing that change doesn't start with the outside world getting better. It starts when you see your own world clearly and decide to take responsibility for it. Not all at once, but one thought, one choice, one honest moment at a time. Everything in your life, from the actions you take to the results you get to the person you become, begins in the quiet space between your ears. It begins with thought. Not just any thought, but the ones you repeat, the ones you believe, the ones you allow to shape how you see yourself and what you believe is possible. Your dominant thoughts carve the path you walk. They create the lens through which you see every challenge and opportunity. They drive your habits, your reactions, your confidence, and your outcomes. Repetition is how those thoughts take root. Your mind responds to what it hears most often, not what is true. You are programming yourself every day, consciously or unconsciously, and that programming builds momentum. It builds belief. It builds identity. But circumstances are not in control. You are. Life may come at you hard, but how you interpret, respond, and rise from those moments is always within your hands. Your mindset will either limit you or lead you, not because of what's happening outside, but because of what you've trained yourself to believe on the inside. Every thought you think is a seed, and you're always planting. Whether it's doubt or discipline, fear or focus, you are feeding something. And what you feed grows. Your reality is not the product of random forces. It's the harvest of what you've been nurturing in your mind. But all of this, the planting, the shifting, the rebuilding, begins with awareness. You must become conscious of the inner narrative running your life, because only then can you disrupt it. Only then can you choose differently. Only then can you begin to transform not just what you do, but who you are. You don't become what you wish for. You don't become what you occasionally think about. You become what you think about consistently, repeatedly, deliberately. Master your thoughts, and you master your life.